Welcome to Merle's Pearls of Business Wisdom, where I, Merle Singer, the relationship miracle worker, talks about all the things relationship and particularly how relationship impacts the workplace. One of the wonderful things I like about this podcast, and it is a podcast, so even if you're not listening to it right at the moment we're recording it, you can listen to it anytime you want. I love that about podcasts. And so I have a guest today. I'm really honored to have a great guest. His name is Jacob Bear. And Jacob works with entrepreneurs and professionals who want to rise to the top 5% of their ability and of their industry. And you can do that, he claims, by expressing their personal story and passions in a creative and authentic way. Welcome, Jacob. It's good to see you here. And tell me, did I describe what you do correctly?
I think you described it perfectly. Thanks, Merle. And I'm really excited to be here. So that's just
We're
your description was the icing on the cake.
good, good. So talk to me. What does it mean when you say you're going to help professionals rise to the top 5%? What do you do? How are you doing that? Do you have a ladder that we climb?
Yeah, there's actually a ladder right here. I'll show you. I built it. No, just kidding. There's a there's a story I like to tell. Everyone's heard about the Pareto principle that 20% of the people own or control 80% of the wealth. And of course, in every industry, 20% of the people get 80% of the business. And then within that 20%, there's another Pareto principle. So you really have 4% getting about 60% of the wealth and the business and the recognition and everything else. But what people don't know is that Pareto had a cat. And I always like to talk about Pareto's cat because the key is to become Pareto's cat. And
I love
here's the thing,
cats.
actually, oh, good. Okay, you're going to like this story. So the truth is, actually, a little bit of research found out Pareto actually owned many cats, but he had this one cat who was the most mischievous, you know, annoying cat, always really curious, would go places he wasn't supposed to be. Pareto didn't allow cats in his study, but this cat would always like slip in the door as soon as he opened it and get up on his desk and sit down on top of his economic charts or his book or whatever he was trying to read or work on. This cat would knock his pipe off the ground and off the desk, and ashes and burns on the rug. It was just, but Pareto loved this cat because the cat was so different and so exceptional and had such a strong and interesting personality. And so, whatever you do, whatever business you're in, you need to be like Pareto's cat, not necessarily annoying people or creating disturbance, but standing out, being different so that you get noticed and you get attention. And that's one of the keys to being in the top 5%.
So you're saying that it's not enough to be a cat. You've got to be the cat that draws attention to yourself. Is that
Well, but I was gonna elaborate on that a little bit. You
go
don't want
ahead?
to just draw attention to yourself, because if anyone can just go out there and just scream like a crazy person or start saying things really controversial, and you'll draw attention to yourself. And even then, maybe a tiny percentage of the people in your market will actually be attracted to that and loyal to you. But it's much better if the way you stand out and draw attention to yourself is by bringing out the elements of your personality that a lot of people kind of hide. And if you bring more of your personal life and your story into your business. um well, here's an example. This other person I work with, Tim Denning, I don't know if you've heard his name, but he's big on promoting oneself on LinkedIn. And he said LinkedIn is like the office, where everybody has their head down, they're trying not to get in trouble. And he believes that you should talk about business, but you should bring your personality into it the way people do on Facebook and Instagram. And I apologize to Tim Denning, I may be misquoting him, but I like that philosophy that when you bring your true authentic self into your business and people understand why you're doing what you do and why you care so much about your clients, a large percent of them are more likely to know, like, and trust you. And we do business with the people we know, like, and trust. So assuming obviously you already have to be really good at what you do and you have to have a good marketing system in place. But once all that is there, the way to get an additional edge and become more competitive is by bringing your personality into it.
Well, some people don't have an exciting personality. I mean, and they could be really good. They could be great engineers, but like people in STEM aren't necessarily noted for being uh, fabulous, very charming. Sometimes they're just introverted. That's it. It's so. So how does that help?
Well, that's true. But as an introvert myself, I can tell you that introverts have a lot of interesting things going on in the background they don't necessarily share or talk about. And if you sit down, this is kind of an exercise for anyone who's listened to this, who's in business for themselves. If you just think about the three most interesting events in your life, and those might be achievements you did, or there might be things that just happened to you. And I'm certain you grew and learned because of those experiences. And probably that shaped your views of the world, your opinions, the things you care about. And most likely, if it's done all those things, you probably have a good story from at least one of those three events that influenced the reason you do business and the way you do business. And if all you do is start sharing that, maybe even you just write one blog post or you talk about it one time in an interview, you get the word out there. Maybe it becomes part of your tagline or your mission statement or something you talk to people when you meet with them one-on-one to discuss business. Now you've got a story that's unique and it's 100% authentic. It's something you're emotionally invested in. It's going to resonate with people. And now you've just made yourself stand out by sharing the things that most people try to hide or at least de-emphasize.
Well, what would so
And
uh, what would be an example of a kind of event or story that somebody that a client of yours has hidden in their background and that with your help they are encouraged to bring that out and that it turns to be out to be interesting and it's an asset for their marketing. What you
okay,
know
well, I've got an
I mean I uh, somebody spent 5 years in jail. No, that's not good. So what? Or maybe it is actually,
mm-hmm.
because I've known speakers that give the whole story about what they did wrong and how they ended up in jail, and
Mm-hmm.
so hmm,
Wow, well, the jail issue, I saw something a few years ago. It was a man who spent years in prison for stealing from a grocery store, and now he has a business where he basically helps retailers. He shows them how the places where they're vulnerable to theft, and so he can help them save tens of thousands of dollars every year, possibly more, depending on the size of their business. And because he's an ex-con, he can say, I was on the other side of this. I know all the tricks. I know the mindset.
right, right.
But as you said, probably most of your listeners haven't spent 5 years in jail. I think, but
It's
I'll give you a better example.
good.
I worked with a man named Tom Anderson who he refurbishes aircraft. He works in it's in Pacoima. There's the Whitefield Airport there. But anyway, he he's a he's a mechanic, but he decided to specialize in airplanes and learn what he could about them. Never actually started working as a work doing the mechanics of the aircraft, like keeping the engine running, but he got a lot of jobs working on the interiors of these aircrafts. And when I was talking to him, I thought he's super creative and artistic, and he's really interested in different materials and embroidery and things like that, which is very different from, being a mechanic or working aircraft. And he had this idea that he could, if there was a way he could put his creativity into his work, and he was thinking of how that could happen. And I was helping him write a brochure for his business, and I went to the airfield, and it's like a giant parking lot for airplanes. There's this concrete and noise, and it smells like burning fuel, and there are grease stains on the ground here and there. And in this kind of smoky, greasy environment, there was an airplane and this lawn chair out in front of it, and this man was sitting on the lawn chair, and he was wearing this nice jacket, and he had a bow tie, just dressed up like elegant, like he looked like he belonged in some kind of early 20th century billiard room or something. And he was smoking a cigar, and he had this round glass, and I'm assuming it was some really expensive brandy, because he was just sitting there on the lawn chair doing this in front of his airplane. And I realized, for someone who owns one of these small aircraft, this is like owning a yacht. It's not about the machinery, it's about, you can fly, you can go anywhere, and you have this life adventure. There's a kind of little element of wonder, and there's prestige around owning an airplane and having the skill to fly it.
Yeah,
And
true.
so I went back to Tom and talked to him about this, and he got me a whole bunch of photographs of the kinds of materials you could use if you really wanted to just do a super high-end, luxurious, just plushed out aircraft interior. And we wrote a brochure. We didn't really talk about how many cubic feet of this we were using, or what grade of material. We took all the technical information out, most of it, and then just talked about adventure and luxury and artistry. And shortly after he started circulating this brochure around to different, I don't know that much about the industry, but I guess there are other companies that provide services to aircraft, and they all network with each other. But this brochure got circulated around, and shortly after that, he got a job for someone who was very wealthy and had a private jet. And this was just a whole nother level of aircraft. And so he was able to charge about 10 times as much for this project as he usually does. And he was able to be super creative, because this person wanted, leather seat covers and hand stitched embroidery with his company's logo or with his coat of arms or something on it, and curtains on the windows. And he just had this, and he got this high end work, and now that's what he does. So he gets to earn a lot more than he was before, and he's in creative, artistic work, which is what he's really passionate about. And I could tell you more stories like that. That's the first one that came to mind. But a lot of times, if you don't, I mentioned 3 stories. Another thing is just something you get excited about that you love. You can find a way to put that into your work, and you'll enjoy it a lot more. And you'll also probably increase your earning potential significantly.
So, does the story that you tell have, how connected does it have to be to what you do? Your specific skill, engineering skill, interior car, plane design skill. I mean, that one is definitely connected. The airplane guy, the story is connected, and and maybe it should always be such.
Well, I would say it's always connected, because if there's not an obvious direct connection between whatever your story or your passion or your life-changing event happens to be and your business, it probably still shapes your overall philosophy, your outlook on life, and that could be connected to your business. There's always a way to draw a connection, and that's one of the things I do as a copywriter with my clients, is I help make those connections.
Yes, yes. I think that's an important thing that you're saying, is that sometimes when we ourselves, as our mini entrepreneurs, we don't see the connections of the different pieces of our life, the different things that go in our head, uh, and that's when you need somebody else, and you would be a great person to get somebody to that point that shows the authentic reason for their passion about what they're doing. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And it's also a lot simpler than you might think.
So give
So
me
there's a lot of actually,
yeah, continue.
okay, there are a lot of questions I ask my clients, especially at the beginning. Actually, somewhere on my blog years ago, I posted 14 questions and I use them all the time. But usually after asking about what are the three most interesting things that happen in your life, the three most interesting events, the other question I'd like to ask is, and this works especially well for someone who's a solopreneur, if you're a coach or a real estate agent or someone where you largely work according to your own schedule and you make all the decisions. But then, so what got you into this business to begin with? And almost always there's some kind of, if there's not a passion that's directly tied in, then it's usually either about time or money. And then that just is a question, well, why do you want to have that kind of freedom or autonomy or that extra wealth or that time? What do you do with it? And usually, so always within a few questions, you can ask yourself questions if you haven't, and you'll probably come up with some great things that you can say about your business and why you're in it that have never been said before, or at least not quite in the way that you're saying it. And that's going to resonate with people who are your potential clients.
You just made me think of something. I think a lot of times with a lot of business people, they say, "Oh, well, that's been done," or "Oh, 1,000 people coach on that," or I don't, I don't have anything different to say. And when the fact of the matter is that you may say the same thing, but you do say it differently, and
Mm-hmm.
um, that it coming from the connection that when you're authentic and when you allow yourself the stories that make you who you are, when you allow them to leak out, uh,
Mm-hmm.
then you're attracted to, so certain people are attracted to you, and
Mm-hmm.
to those people the same thing that someone else may be saying, you say in a way that connects to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
That's
important.
that's critical, yes. And I'm glad you mentioned coaching, Merle, because it's I think one of the most interesting professions because it's so every single coach is different. And that's why you can be a perfect coach for one person and someone else just probably wouldn't be able to grow with you.
Right.
And vice versa. You're looking for a coach. You could have two coaches who are both fantastically qualified. One of them is going to be great. One of them you're not going to learn from. And so for coaches, it's especially important to put your personality and your passion and your own significant life events into your work because that's really what makes you ideal for one person and maybe
Yeah.
not ideal for another. So that's how you find your clients and
Yeah.
your market.
Right.
And also,
And
have you
all.
noticed how many coaches are also speakers?
So, and what do you conclude from that?
They all have interesting stories.
So,
That's why they also become speakers.
I thought it was a way to reach more people at one
Well,
shot.
that too, yeah, there's a practical side. But
But there's no,
it's one thing to want to reach. I'm sorry, I was going to say it's one thing to want to reach more people, and so you become a speaker. It's another thing to have one or more just great stories to tell that people are very glad that they heard, and to become a speaker for that reason. And
yeah. So you said you had another story to tell us.
like, you mean another example of
Yes, I do.
someone tying their passion in with a business? Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm. Try to think of someone else that did this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
you
a realtor I work.
okay,
Okay,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. You got a question? there's a realtor I work with, and he moved to the Bay Area in the city of Vallejo, which is an interesting town. It was actually the first capital of California for a very short time, and there's a whole bunch of political reasons why it didn't remain the capital for very long. But anyway, there are a lot of old buildings there, houses that are 100 years old or even more, obviously. And he bought this old colonial revival home and fixed it up and restored it and learned a lot about finding period hardware. And he would go to garage sales and these old specialized places to get hardware that was actually built at that time period that would actually be the things people would have on their for the hinges on their doors. And he'd also buy replicas because there are places in the Bay Area that make replicas of some of this hardware. He learned about the woodwork and the kind of materials that you can't get anymore because the tools for shaping this wood are no longer made, and just all this stuff that he learned about restoring historic homes. And he looked around his neighborhood and started noticing, he could recognize, oh, well, that's a Tudor, that's a Queen Anne, and he'd say all the features of it. And as a real estate agent, he created a website, vallejohistorichomes.com. And if you go there, there's an archaeology guide, and there's a guide to the different areas and different neighborhoods with a little bit of the story and how they got their names and how the streets got their names. Anyway, he took his passion for restoring old buildings and for history and for antiques, and it became the core of his business. And now he's known as the Vallejo Historic Homes guy. And people who want to buy an old Victorian home or have one they want to sell, they come to him first because they know who he is, and that's what he's super excited about. So that's another example of taking
It's also
an
an
event.
example of going narrow and deep. Everybody says,
Mm-hmm.
have something for everybody. You want to include the whole world so that you have something for everybody. But the fact of the matter is, he narrowed it down and
Mm-hmm.
specialized in this one area and became the expert there. And yet it didn't stop him, I believe, in getting other business that weren't colonial homes.
Oh, you nailed it. How did you know that? I was going to
Because
say.
I'm brilliant.
Okay. Yep. So many people are afraid to narrow down and niche because they think, well, I don't want to pigeon myself and limit myself to this and block all these other opportunities. But it's interesting when you niche down, you end up attracting more opportunities, even if they're not in your niche. And I've seen that happen so many times to so many people in so many different businesses. And it's
Yeah. Well, and I'm one of those people that I have, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that.
mm-hmm,
And it's difficult to say, okay, I'm just going to do this.
mm-hmm,
And probably the best thing to do is to just do this at least until you got it going really good. And then maybe in those speeches that you give to when you talk to different people or when people ask you to talk to their industry or whatever, you can bring this other topic up then. It's
mm-hmm.
it's interesting, you know. So I want to go back to a quote that you made that I brought up to you earlier that I'd like you to explain. And oh, and the other thing we haven't talked about your story and your love of adventure and I think your story is important. But before we get to that, they'll find out about the adventure that you like. But you wrote, adventure will mean something different for every individual, but for all of us, adventure means redemption. What does that mean? How are you redeemed?
Well, I almost wish I had no, but I'll go with it because it actually does fit a little bit. Do you think of redemption as somehow you've got some big problem in your life it's pervasive? It's actually a big part of your life is having this problem, and you redeem yourself, you overcome it. You either you compensate for something bad that you did in the past, or you overcome some burden that you've been carrying for many years, and you finally release it. But all of those things require that you expand and learn and grow. And the way you do that is by having an experience that, or maybe it's going to be many experiences, a hero's journey, something that challenges you and puts you outside of your comfort zone and maybe literally or figuratively in a different environment or different world. And through that experience, you learn and you grow and you come back with something more. And you come back as a changed person. And now you're wiser, stronger, better at whatever it is you're trying to do. You've overcome obstacles that used to be a big part of your life, and now they're just gone, or now you just ignore them.
That's
And so the
brilliant.
event,
That's brilliant, by the way. I mean, that's brilliant. I think it's really um, sometimes that I think sometimes we get so focused, go, well, this is what I need to do. This is what I have to do to get there, and all. And there are some people that say I have a vision, and in 10 years I want to have a house, and it's going to look like this, and all. Some people get that,
mm-hmm,
but most of us get something, not
mm-hmm,
exactly what we had in mind, but we get something that we're really happy with because we bothered to to move forward with what we hoped was our dream. And how many people go to Hollywood to be a famous movie star and end up being a great costumer, or being a production person, or being the director, and loving it
mm-hmm,
because what they dreamed of was in the right vicinity. It wasn't perfectly bullseye. And when they get there and so, no, this ain't it. No, no, this ain't it. No, that's how they get their bullseye.
mm-hmm.
But it takes what you're saying, which is just to get out there and try really hard on any darn thing that you're doing. And the more concerned you are about it,
Mm-hmm.
probably the more important it is for you to do it.
Yes. And the key is they had to set out and go to Hollywood to begin with.
Yes, yes, yes. That's
And
well,
that's,
yes. Say that's what.
oh, I forgot what I was going to say.
I think it's really uh, important to make the adventure, and and the adventure may not be what you had in mind. How about Reef Kareem, who
Oh, yeah.
is a psychiatrist? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he has climbed a particular ladder and has become expert at it and said, yes, but I like this. And I think it was when he was dancing. He liked to do dancing, and ended up doing, I should have him tell the story, but doing things. I know he's been on radio and television. He's done various different things, and it's broadening and everything. But it's him taking the little steps. Well, okay, well, this is good. I'm liking this, but maybe I'm going to try that.
Mm-hmm.
And in a process of small steps, he's getting to making classrooms and teaching things that are
Mm-hmm.
passionate for him.
Oh, yes. And his story is really inspiring to me because he had to set off on basically an adventure to go into a whole different realm, not just because it's so different from being a psychiatrist, but also because he had to challenge the way he was raised and the expectations of his family and kind of what he had always thought was normal, what he was supposed to do. And he realized that that wasn't entirely the life he wanted. And so he took the adventure, he accepted the adventure and went off and pursued something completely different. And then went through it and came back, and now he's synthesized the two and he's creating something brilliant that no one else on this earth could probably mimic or imitate.
Exactly, exactly. That's so. Tell me about your adventure. I want to. I'd love to when you talk about it. And I think
Wow.
people should know. I think it's important to know that somebody's a copywriter, somebody's helping somebody else do something. You say, well, is that exciting or not exciting? It comes from this sense of adventure. It comes from how you've approached your life and said, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do with it, and talk about your adventures.
Wow, how many hours do we have here? I I'll give you a I'm sorry. I'll
No,
give,
not hours and hours.
yeah, I'll give you the short version then. So I always had this sense from when I was a little kid of just I wanted my life to be a series of adventures. And in my 20s, I just spent most of my 20s just doing things. Most of them I probably shouldn't talk about, but I'll give you an example. I went and rode around the United States on freight trains and met hobos and hung out in hobo camps and didn't live like that because when I came back and I'd come back home and I had a job, did sort of a semi-normal life for a few months or a few weeks here and there, but I was also out there doing that. And eventually I went to Europe and lived in Italy for a few years and had a commission only sales job that ended up being enough to pay for the rent and pay for groceries and stuff. And I rode my bicycle on the Appian Way, but I could, instead of just giving a whole laundry list of things that I did and deciding what to censor, let me just tell you that what I came back from was all this idea that um, every single time I did one of those things and it was meaningful, it changed me. And it came back with some kind of insight that led to, at first, it just led to the next adventure, but eventually it just led to me wanting to be more serious and find something I could do professionally. And that led to copywriting because copywriting basically means I get to listen to other people and hear them talk about their stories and their adventures and find ways to express that in a way that's going to attract customers and clients and bring in business. And also, every new copywriting job I take on is itself an adventure because there's learning, there's growth, there's usually things I have to figure out that I'm not entirely comfortable with. I have to talk to people, which terrifies me. And it's always a great experience. It's just another adventure. Um, so that's the short version, I guess.
But it gets to the point that um, whatever, whether it's something that doesn't seem related to any way you're going to make money, or it does, that in either case, it's confronting things that are outside your comfort zone. It's,
Mm-hmm.
when I was younger, I thought, well, God wouldn't want us to be uncomfortable. So I should search and look for those things in my life that are comfortable and that I feel good. And it was only as I grew up to say, whoops, you got it backwards. That it's okay to be comfortable. But if you want anything else besides what you already have, you're going to have to do something different. And anything different is uncomfortable. So rather than saying, uh-oh, I feel uncomfortable, this, maybe I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, it's just the other way. To say, uh-oh, I feel uncomfortable, woohoo, I'm on the right track. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's, I mean, I have to say to you, that was a huge revelation to me. And I still tiptoe out of my comfort zone, but I understand that that's the
Mm-hmm.
direction that I need to go in, or everyone needs to go in if you want to take the next step, see the next scene in the play. You have to move out of what you've already done. So,
Mm-hmm.
and your life, you lived that, you've proved that, by the way, you've approached your life. I wasn't that smart that young.
Neither was
So,
I.
well, younger than me. And so I respect that. And and maybe that's the major thing that we want to say, that we hope people come away, it's fun talking to you and I enjoy the conversation, but it makes me feel good if we can get something through to somebody else that they hadn't thought of before.
Mhm.
And I think this thing about being more comfortable with your discomfort
Mm.
is a good thing. So I think we're heading a little towards the end of our conversation. What would do you have another story that you'd like to tell, or how would you like to summarize?
We'll summarize and just say embrace the adventure. There's something you're probably thinking about doing that's scaring you a little bit right now. And I'm talking to whoever's listening.
Right.
So just unless it's unless it's literally dangerous, I mean, maybe you shouldn't do it then, but even then, maybe, but embrace the adventure. That's the summary.
Some people absolutely take on the danger. That's part of the excitement. But uh,
Mhm.
and I can't think of her name, from National Speakers Association. She'd oh, she'll be mad at me.
Oh,
Yes,
Sarah Safari, right?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, who mountain climbs. So
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
and that can be, by the way, dangerous. People die on that mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So you I don't think you need to climb Mount Everest. You can climb, in fact, I used to have a website called My Mount Everest. I think everybody has
Oh,
their own
okay.
Mount Everest. I think
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't have to be a physical danger. It just enough that it frightens you. It's enough.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Uh-huh.
uh, yeah, I think that's exciting. Yes, my everybody find your own Mount Everest and then climb the darn thing.
Mm-hmm.
And also don't be impatient when it takes. We always have. We say, well, it should take this long. Well, it's taking too long. Well, if it's not gonna be done now, then forget it. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not. Uh, that's to trying to force things to be a certain way rather than do things a certain way and see how it comes out. See what your Mount Everest is. That's kind of the excitement. You can't try to know in advance how it's supposed to end. You can work in a particular direction, but part of living is the excitement of, wow, whoa, this worked out just like I thought. Whoa, this is
Yeah.
completely different. And and you'll have both in your life. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's cool. So those are my words of the day. How about you, Jacob? Uh,
I think
oh,
I'll just say it.
say where, give me your website and where people can reach you, and tell us about you that way.
Okay, the best place to find me on any social media is at the Jacob Bear, TheJacobBear. And whether you're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, that's where you'll find me. LinkedIn, I think it's linkedin.com/the Jacob Bear is my profile. So
And you
that's the
and you
easiest one.
said V like Victor, V.
No, the like THE. Here's why. If you Google me, there's
Oh,
another Jacob Bear. He's an Israeli scientist, published a lot of work. He always shows up first in Google. So I've set myself up as the Jacob Bear.
Okay.
So, he's also the Jacob Bear, but I'm the Jacob Bear. That's how you, and my website, there's actually it's jacobbear.com. But if you go to jacobbear.com/free stuff, I have some little handouts I give away. There's a thing on social media now that's largely outdated. I put it up there a few years ago, but I'm working on and almost finished with a guide to using Chat GPT while applying a lot of principles I talked about here about being adventurous, being authentic, being original, being unique, being like Pareto's cat, and then letting AI power all of that so that you can just totally dominate your niche and your business and be successful beyond your wildest dreams. So that's not up there yet, but it should be up there in a week or so. Maybe by the time you publish this podcast,
Right.
that will be
Right.
there.
So yeah, take a chance and say, look at the Jacob Bear or the Jacob Bear. So it doesn't sound
Jacob Bear,
yeah.
yeah, the THE. Or go to jacobbear.com/free stuff.
I like that free stuff. All righty, thank you. I I want to say thank you for listening, by the way, everybody here, listening to our conversation. Uh, Jacob Bear and myself, Merle of Merle's Pearls of Business Wisdom. Uh, and I am your host, the Relationship Miracle Worker. You can find, this is the important thing, you can find this episode and all past episodes on relationshipmiracleworker.com/podcast. But also, you can go to Spotify, you can go to Apple Podcasts, you can go to Amazon Music, and all your other favorite podcast platforms and find us there. Look for Jacob and I for sure. And I'll add a free gift to the podcast page at some point with Jacob. And I'm going to just say it's time to say goodbye. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, audience, and see you next time.